Really? Is that a criminal issue?
They're trying to criminalize exercising of the First Amendment.
Well, the indictment, according to that analysis, is a complete sham.
I don't believe any Republican can get a fair trial.
Are you listening to these people? Has anyone, by the way, told Nancy Pelosi and Dick Durbin about this? The bottom line is this. Trump was charged with 2 counts of conspiracy and 2 counts of obstruction of an official proceeding for adopting and pressing an unconventional and controversial legal view that the electors in this presidential race could be replaced with new electors. Well, the indictment, according to that analysis, is a complete sham.
Well, yeah, if you frame it exactly the way Fox News and Laura Ingraham tried to frame it, then sure, it looks like a sham. But this is just another technique that the Republican Party and the conservative movement is willing to engage in, the highest order, the highest level of gaslighting, to give some plausible deniability, to give some benefit of the doubt, to give some sliver of hope to conservatives who are now facing the 3rd indictment of their beloved former president, Donald Trump. Trump was indicted in Washington, D.C. federal court over his involvement in the January 6th insurrection and the fraudulent elector scam as he tried to defraud, according to 4 counts of the indictment, defraud the United States of America along with defrauding voters. There's a lot to cover in terms of how Republicans are responding and how they are going to new levels of gaslighting in order to give Donald Trump cover. Their technique, well, they are trying to categorize this indictment as being an indictment of the First Amendment. Donald Trump's right to exaggerate, Donald Trump's First Amendment right to lie, even just outright lie, Donald Trump's First Amendment right to say statements that could be fraudulent if acted upon. What they are leaving out on purpose, and I'll read a couple of tweets from Senators Marco Rubio and others. What they're leaving out is, well, yeah, there was a crime involved. This is not a First Amendment indictment, but that does not stop the Republican Party from using this talking point that we covered yesterday. Take a listen.
There is room for criticism in terms of the claims being made about stolen elections, but it's criminalizing all of that. You know, it states in the indictment the president spent months spreading false rumors and allegations of election irregularities. Really? Is that a criminal issue? I mean, is that the basis of this conspiracy?
Again, that was the voice of attorney Jonathan Turley, who is a conservative commentator on Fox News. He was using that as a trial balloon. This was the first time I heard this defense for Donald Trump. And it's not even a defense, right? It's just outright gaslighting. He tried it out on Fox News. And ever since, we've had nonstop regurgitation of this talking point, which is a lie. They are trying to convince Republicans that this indictment is an indictment over Donald Trump saying false statements about the election, trying to make it sound like this is a First Amendment issue. Now, they have another defense that they're running simultaneously. Listen to this clip of Lindsey Graham. He's going to do a 2-for-1. He's doing 2 things specifically. Number one, he's trying to make the case that this case should not be tried in Washington, D.C. because it's impossible for Trump to get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. And then he simultaneously tries to float that idea that this indictment is not really a true indictment. It's an indictment of the First Amendment.
Any conviction in D.C. against Donald Trump is not legitimate. So they're charging him with the crime of taking bad legal advice. That's what this is about. They're trying to criminalize the attorney-client relationship. They're trying to criminalize exercising of the First Amendment. The judge in this case hates Trump. You could convict Trump of kidnapping Lindbergh's baby in D.C. You need to have a change of venue. You need a new judge, and we need to win in 2024 to stop this crazy crap.
That was the dramatic music from Sean Hannity as he got ready to go to break. Everything is high alert drama over there on Fox News. But did you hear the 2-for-1 special? Number one, they're trying to convince Fox viewers that this, again, is an issue of the Department of Justice overreaching to indict Donald Trump over making false statements. when that's not the case. The second thing they're trying to forward is the idea that this indictment, or rather this case, should not take place in Washington, D.C. I want to read a tweet from Marco Rubio, Senator Marco Rubio from the state of Florida. This is what he said on Twitter about the indictment. He said, quote, "Apparently, it is now a crime to make statements challenging election results if a prosecutor decides those statements aren't true. So when should we expect indictments of the Democrat politicians who falsely claimed Russia hacked the 2016 election?" Again, this is not an indictment about the false statements that Donald Trump made. The false statements were simply the precursor to the fraudulent elector scam. It was a precursor to the actions and the violence of January 6th. It became the foundation for the acts of fraud. These people know this. Marco Rubio knows this. Lindsey Graham knows this. Fox News knows this, but that doesn't stop them from gaslighting the American people. Here's another clip from Laura Ingraham where she is basically saying, get ready, because what you've done to Donald Trump, we're going to do to you.
If this is how low the bar is set going forward, then Smith and Garland and every prosecutor who pushed this fraud of a case should all expect to face similar treatment to what they're putting Trump through.
That's the threat. So on multiple levels, the Republican Party is doing everything, and conservatives, they're doing everything they can to neutralize the ability of this country to hold Donald Trump accountable for actual crimes. They will gaslight, they will distort, they will outright lie, and then they will threaten. They will make thinly veiled threats because we dare to hold the former president accountable. In fact, it's not even just conservatives. The New York Times, depending on which writer you get over at the New York Times. But here's a headline from New York Times. Trump election charges set up clash of lies versus free speech. No, it doesn't, New York Times. This is not, the indictment does not set up a clash between free speech and lies. No, it sets up a clash between a president who used his lies as the foundation for the crimes that he later committed and that he encouraged other people to commit. The real conflict, the real clash that's going on right now is how many people are going to create space for this gaslighting that's coming from Republicans. And not only are they gaslighting us on the basis of like you can't read for yourself. You look at the indictment and see, oh, he's being indicted for X, Y, and Z. And they say, no, he's actually being indicted for A and B. You know, it really is plain and clear as day as being able to read for yourself. But it doesn't matter because the party's greatest command was that 2 + 2 = 5. And the Republican Party's demand is that you look at this indictment and forget about, first of all, if you just don't read it, then that's even better. And just take their word for it, because their word says that this is an indictment over his free speech. Therefore, it's illegitimate. And if that's not enough, they're going for this idea that it's impossible for not only Donald Trump to get a fair trial in cities like Washington, D.C., but it's impossible for conservatives to get a fair trial in those cities. Here is Sean Hannity with his dramatic music asking this question of Governor Ron DeSantis, who is also running for the president of the United States.
And I know you're rivals right now, but you said something that really stuck with me, and that is, I don't believe any Republican can get a fair trial in Washington, D.C., or New York, or in Fulton County, Georgia. Should there be a better way to administer justice and not put liberal Democrats in conservative districts for trials? It should be a district where there is a fair balance of a jury pool.
Absolutely. I mean, in D.C., they will go after you if you're a Republican. The facts be damned. Republicans don't have a fair shot there. They should be able to have a fair trial somewhere else.
All right.
Talk about a two-tiered system of justice, right? Sean Hannity even threw in Fulton County, Georgia. Now, listen, I know Atlanta is black and Fulton County is Atlanta, but this is still Georgia. And there is, I'm saying this is still Georgia. I don't live there anymore. But when I lived there, let me reassure you that Georgia is still white. Atlanta still has plenty of white, good old boys, as well as the gentrifiers. So there's plenty of white folks that are there for Donald Trump. And there's plenty of conservatives there for Donald Trump. But it's funny how he pointed out Fulton County, Georgia, as if it is the same type of elitist bastion of liberal democracy as Washington, D.C. or New York. For that matter, I mean, I don't even think New York is. Right. So they're really crafting this ridiculous argument that conservatives can't get, or Donald Trump specifically can't get a fair trial in any of these cities. Where do you want him to go? Well, Donald Trump has a request himself. He's very specific about it. This talking point has gotten really popular. Donald Trump took to Truth Social last night, and this is what he said about his venue. He said, quote, "The latest fake case brought by crooked Joe Biden and deranged Jack Smith will hopefully be moved to an impartial venue, such as the politically unbiased nearby state of West Virginia. Impossible to get a fair trial in Washington, D.C., which is over 95% anti-Trump, and for which I've called for a federal takeover." Well, I mean, that federal takeover part is why you got in trouble in the first place, Donald Trump, but I digress. Continuing on, for which I have called for its federal takeover in order to bring our capital back to greatness. It is now a high crime embarrassment. It is now a high crime. It's hard reading, Donald Trump. It is now a high crime embarrassment to our nation and indeed the world. This indictment is all about election interference. Okay, anyway, he said a lot, but the core part is at the beginning where he wants to go to West Virginia. He wants to go to West Virginia to have a fair. I mean, is it because West Virginia went for Donald Trump in the 2020 election? I mean, I know Georgia flipped. And so what they're basically saying is that it's impossible for a conservative to get a fair trial, Donald Trump specifically, to get a fair trial in Washington, D.C. or in a liberal or a state that voted blue. Georgia is not blue. Georgia is purple at best. And that's what I get for, arguing and discussing these things within the frame that's given to us by conservatives, right? Now we're going to be discussing whether or not he should change venues. No, we're not going to discuss that and the merits of whether or not a conservative can. Of course, a conservative can get a fair trial anywhere in this country. This entire system capitulates and bends over backwards for conservatives, especially rich conservative men. But that doesn't stop them from using this next level of gaslighting. And of course, someone like Ron DeSantis goes one step further and wants to defund the entire DOJ and the FBI as a result of this. So whether or not they get a change of venue, it doesn't matter so much as they're using this as an opportunity to forward their fascist agenda, which is to destroy the FBI and the DOJ, because the FBI and the DOJ had the nerve to investigate these insurrectionists in the first place. It's the entirety of the federal government. Listen to Don Jr., not Don Jr., which one is this? This is Eric, the one that he likes less. Listen to Eric Trump as he discusses the need to defund the IRS because the IRS is weaponized against people like Donald Trump.
What they did to him over Russia. I mean, how about Obama literally weaponizing the IRS against all conservatives? This is what they do, and this is what my father, more so than any person in American history, has shown the American people. He's literally exposed these frauds for exactly who they are. And it's sad, we're no better than some of these third world countries around the world. We are literally trying to imprison political opponents. We're better than this.
So again, okay, so here's the obvious other layer is that this is all frivolous from the beginning, and that this is the political persecution of a political opponent. So they have plenty of ways of trying to excuse this away. The interesting thing about this particular indictment is that it has given Mike Pence, former Vice President Mike Pence, somewhat of a backbone, somewhat of a spine. I want to play a clip of him on CNN with Dana Bash last week, as she has to remind him that Trump and his supporters called for him to be hanged. And yet he still didn't say anything for the last year, 2 years, said nothing, just kind of weaseled his way around it. But his song and dance has changed dramatically. So the first clip is going to be of the real Mike Pence, and then the second clip will be of how Mike Pence is sounding now that there's a third indictment on Donald Trump. He's sounding a little froggy.
Passionate group of voters, much more passion than they had in 2020, and much more passion than they had in 2016. I think it would be very dangerous.
Does that kind of rhetoric worry you? Well, it doesn't worry me because I have more confidence in the American people. I'm not concerned about it beyond that.
That's pretty remarkable that you're not concerned about it, given the fact that they wanted to hang you on January 6th.
Okay, so that was last week. Now here's Mike Pence yesterday after the indictment, the third indictment came down for Donald Trump.
But let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes, which would have resulted in the issue being turned over to the House of Representatives, and literally chaos would have ensued. So, Martha, I just people can read the indictment, and frankly, I've said before, I had hoped it had not come to this point. You know, I don't know if the government can meet the standard, the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt for criminal charges. But the American people deserve to know that President Trump and his advisors didn't just ask me to pause. They asked me to reject votes, return votes, essentially to overturn the election and to keep faith with the oath that I made to the American people and to Almighty God. I rejected that out of hand, and I did my duty that day.
Okay. Mike Pence grew a spine. You know, of course, he has the cover now of the indictment from Jack Smith, and he also has the incentive that he's running for president himself. But I also think that Mike Pence is a part of the standard Republican establishment that's totally okay with the things that Donald Trump did. They just don't like Donald Trump because he's uncouth. Right. So this is not a victory. This is not a change of heart or character for Mike Pence. This is opportunistic. And this is opportunistic for his own personal political ambitions running for president. But also it is opportunistic in that it is the opportunity that the Republican establishment has to get rid of Donald Trump. And so he's leaning in. But, you know, I don't know if someone tried to hang me. Had their followers tried to hang me, I think I'd have to lean in a lot sooner than 2 years after the fact.